I served as a missionary for the Mormon church when I was young. We were assigned for 2 years to leave our city. I was sent to Puebla and some parts of Oaxaca, and also to the mountainous area of Guerrero. This experience happened there, in the municipality called Tlapa de Comonfort. It's a mountainous region. I had just received a companion who came from the United States. It was his first time in Mexico. One time we met a man walking through the town center who told us the name of the settlement where he lived and asked us to visit. His house was halfway up a hill, as most of the communities around that municipality are in the mountains. We made the appointment and in the afternoon we went to visit him. We were climbing a mountain path when at one point we got lost at a fork in the trail halfway up. It was around 4 in the afternoon. Right there we heard little stones rolling near us. We didn't know if someone was throwing them at us. We thought it could have been something we did or some animal. We decided to keep going and ignored it. We finally visited the man, talked with him, and it got a bit late. We wanted to get to know the area. I was new there and it was easy to meet people in those parts. On the way back, at the same place we had gotten lost, at that fork in the trail, on a large rock there was a boy crouched. I guessed he was about 7 years old. He was seated with his back to us, but he was throwing stones, flinging them backward. It seemed very strange. We approached and I decided to start a conversation. I greeted him and asked if he was from nearby. It was already dark, about 7:30 in the evening, but the boy didn't answer. It made me uneasy. He still didn't turn. A few moments later he turned. He looked like a normal boy, but his eyes had a total expression of hatred, as if we had done something bad to him. He looked as if he had been crying. Suddenly he started saying things in a language we didn't know. My companion couldn't understand him. Of course it wasn't English. At first I thought it might be Mixtec, because in that municipality many communities speak Mixtec and I had heard some greetings and even rude words in Mixtec before, so I knew that the child was not using that language. Already a little afraid, we decided to ignore him and leave. As we were walking down the mountain path, that boy began to throw stones at us, and as we descended we tried to pick up the pace. We felt so afraid that we began to run, and we realized the boy was running after us, throwing stones and shouting angry words. We ran down the hill and at the foot of the hill there was a very humble little grocery store. We got there terrified. There was a woman and I began to tell her, "There's a boy, do you know him? Is he someone's son? This boy is cursing at us and is really angry. From up on the ridge he's been throwing stones at us. Do you know him?" As soon as I started telling her, she asked me what the boy looked like, how he was dressed. When I described him, the woman grabbed a scapular and a rosary and simply said, "If you speak of God, then start praying." And in less than 3 seconds the woman was on her knees. It was very strange, honestly. I was afraid the boy would come in and not just throw stones but damage the woman's store. In the end that's what happened. The boy suddenly came inside. I began to pray, asking God to help with the boy, to bless him so he would find peace, that if he was angry with us we could ease his pain. I was praying silently and when I looked at the woman she was in a sea of tears, desperate and very afraid of that boy while she kept praying. I want to make clear that he was a completely normal-looking child, only his face had that total expression of hatred. I've seen many children in my life. I have one of my own, but those aren't the kinds of features you expect from a child in the purity of childhood. The eyes were what terrified me the most. I have seen angry children, but I had never seen a child who radiated that anger, that hatred. That was what stood out. I felt as if his look could knock me down. The boy got closer and closer and I kept praying. When he reached us he began to strike me. My companion at that moment fainted from the shock and the boy started to laugh. It was a terrible laugh, a laugh I hadn't even heard in horror movies. It was mocking, but the most terrifying thing was that I could hear many voices. That's when I became even more frightened. This boy hit me and clawed at my pants, and at one moment he grabbed my leg and bit it. That bite took a very long time to heal. I had to leave the town and go to Matamoros in Puebla to be treated at the medical center because it was getting badly infected. They asked me what happened and I told them a boy had bitten me, but the person who treated me said a dog had attacked me and that the dog had very strong bacteria in its mouth. He never believed me that a child had bitten me. Continuing with the story, the boy clung to my leg and when he bit me I kicked my leg and the boy flew near the door of the store. The woman stood up and began to sprinkle holy water at the doorway. The boy kept saying threats, but when he saw the wet ground the boy wouldn't come closer. After that I revived my companion. I was afraid to leave because it was very dark and we still had about 30 minutes to get to where we were living. But we had no choice. When we left the store we ran. We were extremely scared. Fortunately we didn't encounter anything else on the way. We arrived at the house, knelt, prayed, and after that I spoke with my companion. He told me how he felt and what he had thought. I stayed with a doubt. How did that woman know something bad was going to happen the moment I began to describe the boy, since she immediately knelt and began to pray? Maybe she had heard that this happened often in that place or had some previous experience or someone had come to her store before. But above all, who or what was that child? I regret not asking the woman. All those who have gone on mission have to go to the Missionary Training Center, the MTC, before their service begins. The MTC is a unique experience. Those who have been there say it's almost like Hogwarts. You learn a lot in a short time and there's so much food that many would prefer to do their mission there. A certain group of missionaries in 2010 were doing the same as you and I are doing now, telling and listening to paranormal stories. Missionaries from an entire district, shortly before lights out, were gathered in one room sitting in circles sharing their paranormal experiences. When bedtime came they prayed as a district wishing each other sweet dreams. However, that same night, in the room where the stories had been told, a series of things began to happen. The room was occupied by two missionaries. The one in the top bunk didn't hear the stories and didn't know what happened until the next morning. He was completely asleep. The one in the bottom bunk, on the contrary, had a dream. He said he heard many people, and more than babbling, they were articulating a language he couldn't understand. It began with one or two people speaking and suddenly it felt as if hundreds of people of different ages were gathered, talking, shouting, and crying in various languages. He woke with his heart racing and thought the dream had come from the big dinner they had eaten. On top of that, he could feel his bed moving. He thought it was his companion, so he got up, but his companion was fast asleep. After a while he lay down and fell asleep again. Suddenly the bed shook inexplicably. When he woke and saw his companion still motionless, he left the room terrified. His surprise was that those strange things didn't only happen to him. Everyone who had been telling stories earlier had been victims of unexplainable events. Some said they saw shadows and figures at the windows. Others said things were thrown around in their rooms. Others told that all night they were being called by their names, which is strange because in those places nobody knows each other by name. Whatever it was that happened, they think that telling paranormal stories drew the attention of certain things. I was a Mormon in the past. Once I was transferred to an area that covered part of the San Carlos Apache Reservation in Arizona. My companion and I were given a truck to use because we served about 5 small towns of around 2,000 inhabitants each. We drove back at dusk because we had a rule not to stay in that town after nightfall for safety reasons. If someone is familiar with the Superstition Highway and the turn to 177, that was the area where this happened. My companion was driving because he had 5 months in the area. He was telling me about the place and the towns when suddenly a huge mangy dog walked into the middle of the road. My companion immediately began to accelerate. I started shouting, "What the hell are you doing? You're going to hit that dog." He just told me to shut up and not to look at the thing on the road. As we got closer it began to look less like a dog and more like a person, but it just sat there in the middle of the road. The car was doing about 100 kilometers per hour, and when we passed it I made eye contact with that thing, and I swear to God it was smiling. Its face was indescribable, as if someone had found a dead dog on the road and was wearing its skin. I tried to turn around and my companion immediately hit my arm and shouted, "I told you not to look." It took me the whole night to get him to tell me what the hell it had been, but he didn't. The next day, at a district meeting, when I told the district leader what I had seen, he finally told me the whole story. He began by telling me about the native tradition and the reservation's history, and that there is a legend among the natives about something called skinwalkers, someone who has acquired the ability to become any animal. He said that what I saw on the road that afternoon was one of those. There was a zone conference in Guadalajara, at the stake where the mission offices were. It was a wonderful conference despite the bad weather. When it ended, the missionaries left the stakes and, as is well known, the hard work is left to the secretaries. Once they finished everything in its place, the rain began. For those who have been missionaries, rain is not an obstacle to moving from appointment to appointment, least of all if you are a secretary. So they got into the mission van, and on their way they found two unfortunate missionaries who had been unable to reach the bus stop because of the rain. They decided to give them a ride since it was already late. On the way to the missionaries' house, they passed a straight road surrounded by grasslands. In the distance there was something unusual. A person standing in the middle of the downpour looking at the sky. This person was moving their arms as if applauding, raising them to shoulder height and bringing them over their head. They wore light-colored clothing and their demeanor showed euphoria. When they passed the man, the driver and his co-pilot glanced at each other, as did the missionaries in the back. Nobody spoke until one of them broke the silence and said, "Do you feel the same?" Everyone confessed that the most terrible fear they had ever felt ran through their bodies. But it wasn't the fear of having seen a spirit, it was the fear of dying, that something sudden and instantaneous was going to happen to them. They finally reached their destination without anything happening. They said they lost sleep and suffered nightmares for several days. In their dreams they saw their relatives in the same scene, in the middle of that road in the rain, making the same gestures the man had made with his hands, but in the dreams their relatives were covered in blood. Besides that, they said at night they felt as if someone was watching and following them. By day it was a little easier to deal with the fear, but at night it was worse. The question is, what did they see, or who were they really looking at during those seconds on that rainy, deserted road? What really made them feel that way for so many days? They never said.